Welcome back to the SampanViking on China channel. Today I'm going to talk to you under the general heading of Biden's JFK moment. And just to prove that if you practice saying that long enough, you can say it with a straight face. Well, almost anyway. What it comes down to is what underlies all of this is an attempt to try to understand what is driving this current narrative about Russia and Ukraine. A narrative which is so clearly at odds with the facts on the ground, a narrative which is contradicted by the Russians clearly stating they have no intention of invading Ukraine, a narrative which is clearly contradicted by the Ukrainians saying that they see no unduly high levels of activity across the border, and please can you stop saying these that you do because it's damaging our economy. And Europe saying, can you please not go around saying this? We don't believe it, and it is seriously disrupting our energy prices at a time when energy is scarce and the cost of gas is going through the roof. So in other words, there seems to be a narrative going around which is easily disproved and which nobody other than a few key players seem to want. And those key players, of course, being the United States and the United Kingdom, plus a couple of other non-regional hangers-on. And the question is, well, why? What is the point of doing this? What is the objective? A lot of commentators have also been asking the same question, and they come back with a number of different answers. And whilst I would not be so arrogant as to dismiss any of them, because these are all very intelligent people that have been looking at the problem, I suspect the trouble is people tend to pick their favourite and then exclude the others. Whilst if I've learnt anything in my many years on this earth, it is that there is no such thing as a single driver in politics, and that usually it is a collection of different objectives bundled together. The difference between a successful program and an unsuccessful program is that when it is successful, there is clear and concise direction that holds all the parties together to follow an agenda and a narrative which is clearly defined and clearly planned. And when it's unsuccessful, it is simply a grouping of convenience that is poorly thought through, poorly led, and which doesn't therefore manage to have the cohesion or the foresight or any of the other prerequisites that you would expect for a major policy initiative to have success. And sadly, I think it is the latter that we have with regards to the Russia-Ukraine narrative that the United States, primarily the United States, is promulgating. Uh, it does come down, I think, to the fact that Biden is probably the worst president in US history. I know he's got quite a bit of competition for that, but he does seem to be leading the pack quite substantially. And he is looking, as I said earlier, a third-rate politician looking for a legacy because, let's be honest, he probably isn't going to have anything else to show for his presidency. And and again trying to rescue what's left of his presidency as it absolutely plummets through the floor in the poll ratings. And this, he seems to think, is his way to do it. A good patriotic, nationalistic rallying call that so he can wrap himself around the flag and people will rally to that standard and therefore to him. This, I think, is being done in conjunction with the objectives of the neocons, which Biden may or may not be a fully signed up member. I'm not going to speculate on that. He's certainly very close to it. His ties with the Ukraine and Maidan and all the rest of it suggest that he is. But some of his other comments, he suggests that either he isn't or that, quite frankly, he is so incapable of doing the job due to age and other infirmity that he doesn't really know what day of the week it is anymore. So either of those two is fine, but it means that leadership at the top is very, very weak. Leadership is being controlled by string pullers, probably of various stripes, and so of course cohesion and concise execution are a million miles away. It just isn't happening. But Biden is desperate in order to achieve a legacy for himself, and this seems to be the one thing that he can think of. But being pursued ideologically by competing factions, they seem blind to the damage that they are doing to their own side in Europe and their so-called allies, and only strengthening, really, the people that they are targeting. For the neocons, obviously they're going to sign up for this. I mean, the obvious the obvious thing to say is that if people really did care about security in Europe and to defuse the situation, there are a few simple steps that they could take in order to achieve it. One, put their full weight behind the implication of the Minsk Agreement, that UN ratified agreement that is supposed to bring an end to the causes of conflict in the Ukraine. The United States gives it lip service, but it doesn't actually act. The other is simply to say that that a new arrangement, a new form of security arrangement, can be found that does not include the Ukraine joining NATO, which I think the Russians would respond to positively. And it doesn't seem to mean that Ukraine stays out in the cold. It could be that for certain frontline states that a different kind of arrangement is made. That reflect a neutrality that reflects the forms of the 21st century. Who knows? It's not beyond the realms of reason to quickly devise a number of good scenarios in how that could work. But all of these, even the thought of this is being discounted, and that suggests that the neocons, despite the debacle in Afghanistan, despite the complete horlicks of an attempted regime change operation earlier this year in Kazakhstan, that these people still dream of pursuing this project somehow to extend the natification of the Caucasus and Central Asia in order to surround and facilitate the full breakup of the Russian Federation. And the causes for this, of course, is hardly rocket science. In the first instance, obviously, China is the ultimate target of the United States. That is a given. You don't need to even ask that question. China is the ultimate target. Obviously, the United States and allies are acutely aware of the power of the Russian-Chinese alliance, and so they are looking to break that as quickly as possible. They see Russia as the weak link, which in many ways, I suppose it is fair, although militarily and certainly nuclear arsenal, it isn't. But economically and demographically, undoubtedly, it is. So they are going to try their luck to break up the Russian Federation and then turn their full attention on China when its allies and when its main ally is gone and its lesser allies are disheartened. Clearly, they are clinging to this dream, whilst, to even the casual observer, obviously, dream this now has become, because I think the point of no return, where the neocons had a chance of achieving such an aim, has gone. It has passed. So we are now finding ourselves in a situation where a perfectly rational and reasonable way forward is being blocked by ideologues in the United States who are determined to pursue what is now a lunatic obsession in order to achieve a totally unachievable objective. And this has not yet sunk in. And of course, ire is being directed at those that seem to oppose, which seems to be most of Europe at the moment. Mr. Macron, in particular, seems to be becoming a target for American neocon discontent. Mr. Zelensky in the Ukraine, likewise, because he hasn't endorsed the US narrative wholeheartedly, maybe having to worry about his political future, as once again the hawks that got rid of Yanukovych start turning their attention to him because he isn't as rabidly anti-Russian enough as they are wanting. And not even the British Prime Minister appears to be safe from this. Boris has made himself quite vulnerable, obviously, with all these party shenanigans. Strange that parties in Downing Street should somehow take precedence over impending World War III, if you were to believe the narrative coming both out of London and Washington, but apparently it is. And Boris himself is now coming under direct attack from the neocon element within the British political system. One gentleman in particular, Tobias Ellwood, who is chairman of the Defence Secretary and a former chair of the Defence Committee, Select Committee, and also a former Defence Secretary, has put in a letter declaring no confidence in the Prime Minister. Where he goes, others of that Officer Turk, Young Turk clique will undoubtedly follow, the Tugendhats, the Duncan Smiths, etc., etc., simply to install a more compliant pro-agenda on-message British leader, which Boris, to his credit at least, is not. And likewise, there's no point looking at the Labour Party in the UK either, because Sir Keir Starmer is the heir of Blair. Sir Keir would be following in the footsteps of Sir Anthony very, very closely indeed. So another neocon waiting in the wings in the Labour Party to take over. So Boris trying to do his best, blustering his way through the various denunciations of Russian misdeeds. But again, he's in serious trouble, so you can see that he's having to go along with this to try to bolster up his, again, wrapping himself in the flag and hoping that people are added to the standard and therefore to him. But he's being undermined by the hardcore neocons in the British political system, in the Conservative Party. And so his position is looking a bit shaky at the moment. It would be dangerous if he were to go, because it means that somebody wholly in tune with the neocon agenda were to be put in, and this would up the ante in Europe quite considerably. Certainly put Britain in even more stark opposition to the European Union than it is already. So again, you can add to that, as well as seeking to shore up his dodgy premiership at the moment, his shaky premiership at the moment. It also coincides with a Britain that's cut loose with Brexit and is now looking to assert itself, establish itself as an individual player once again, and maybe a power player on the world stage. Again, I think that is rather a tall order, and it is as fanciful in its own way as the US neocon dream of the natification of the Caucasus and Central Asia. So I think that is it in a nutshell. We have all these players trying desperately to shore up this easily disproven narrative, um, and doing it in a ramshackle way, because nobody really is steering the projects, is steering the ship. In fact, you get left with the image that there's about a half a dozen competing hands, all grabbing the tiller and pointing it in different directions. In a mad scramble in the bridge. It doesn't bode well. This is a recipe for disaster, and I think any casual observer of what is going on can see the disaster looming, because there are rocks on the horizon, and nobody is making any effort to steer the ships of state onto a clearer path. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I realise it's not exactly the most concise subject, because it is trying to fit together numerous disparate strands of news and events, and trying to find that elusive underlying cause, underlying motif, which does bind the whole thing together. And of course, when nobody wants you to really know what that is, we are left with informed guesswork, and if nothing else, simply eliminating those that it obviously is not. Thank you very much for joining me for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like. If you don't subscribe, please do. It's free and it helps the channel to grow. If you would like others to hear what I have to say, please hit the share button. And if you would like to make a comment on this subject or on the channel in general, please leave a comment below, and I will answer to the best of my ability where it is appropriate to do so. Thank you very much, and I hope you join me in the next video.